we will get underway, I think. So my name's Stephen Mo, kia ora koto, ko Stephen toku ingoa, no Aotearoa ao. E ona he kororia ki te atua he whakarau pai ki ngā tangata katoa, e mangorango ki te whenua. Just a real welcome to everybody who's joined. It's been great to see so many responses. And the purpose of the call originally was just to gather a couple people, maybe 5 or 6 people together. But clearly we all have a heart for charities. We all want to see them thrive through difficult times. And I think the response from all of you joining shows that concern. So in order to give a little bit of structure to this, I've asked a few of us to say some things at the beginning. So that will be what we do. And then I'd love to hear from all of you. Zoom has some amazing features. And one of them is that you can actually send people to breakout rooms. So because there's so many of you, I think it might be helpful if we do that for part of the session so that we can get a chance to hear from each other. Because with such a large group, I think it will be difficult if we're all trying to contribute. So what I'm planning to do is send you to these breakout rooms. You'll be joined by 8 or 10 people. You can have some discussion, and then one of you can report back to the bigger, wider group, because otherwise it will be a bit frustrating, I think, if we're all trying to have our say. So just before we get onto it, one of the things is just with Zoom, it is possible to mute your end. So if you notice there's sounds in behind you, at the bottom left on my screen anyway, you can mute yourself. And then when you want to speak, you can unmute. And that might reduce some of the background noise from the 50 of us that are on this. And also, I assume you can all hear me, but you need to enable your audio to make sure that people can hear you. And also the chat function is something that you can just use anytime. So we'll just see how that goes. I am recording this. We'll see how useful it is at the end. And if we think it's useful, we can share it with others, because I've had lots of people say, I can't make it at the last minute. I wish I could be there. So to start with, if it's okay, I would just like to introduce Mark Prain, if you're on the line, Mark. And the reason is that Mark literally phoned me a week ago and had this idea of, hey, why don't we get some people together and talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the charitable sector. And originally it was just going to be some of us gathering here in Christchurch, maybe over lunch. And then I thought, well, let's use technology, because there's bound to be other people out there in New Zealand who have a concern and would like to be involved. And then it's become what it's become, which is wonderful. So Mark, if it's okay, do you mind just giving us a comment, since you were one of the people that, we kind of collaborated to come up with this, and just give us maybe your perspective to begin.
Surely. Thank you, Stephen. Kia ora te whānau, in extraordinary times, quite obviously. But speaking as a militant optimist, we will get there. But if we're going to get there, obviously we need to draw strength from one another. From the Hillary Institute's point of view, our work is largely international, but I find myself, like all of us, very much domiciled back in New Zealand at the moment. And so we, in our small way, are looking forward to contributing to the sector as a whole, as a charity, and to drawing from you some thinking, some heart, and some inspiration, really, in terms of how we might not just manage this situation, but optimize the situation. And so in the spirit of this korero today, and again, thank you, Stephen, for setting it up. And I think we are, all of us, really charged to try and engage with one another as productively as possible. And as I say, with plenty of creativity and heart and optimism. So I won't say any more at this point. There are many of you out there with wonderful things to offer this conversation this morning. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you again, and kia ora
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful. Some of you, I don't know all of you, but I've been on the Charities Services sector group for a while. And so I asked Sarah Doherty if she would mind saying a word or two. So she's the current co-chair of that group. So this is a group that feeds into Charities Services thoughts and views of the sector. So Sarah, do you mind having your comment?
Kia ora, Stephen. Kia ora koutou. You'll see something fuzzy happening. My husband John works in the sector and he's in the room too. And we've got that weird, well, it's a little bit weird, alternative virtual background, so you can't see the shambles in the spare room. And it goes a bit weird. So that's what's going on visually. Great idea. So Mark and Stephen, thanks for pulling this together so quickly and relatively easily for all of us to get together. I've just got a reflection to offer actually at the start, and it's something that I've been noticing.
We can hear you.
Yes. But I also see a lot of focus on trying to get the systems up and working, and we haven't just picked our laptops up from our desk and put them on our kitchen table and carried on laughing, so to speak. So I just wanted to send a reminder out about self-kindness first. This is like the ultimate situation of putting your oxygen mask on first. So just making sure that you're doing what you need to do to process what's actually going on so that you can lead more effectively. And just a reminder really of taking good care while we all scramble to do as much as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can. So that really is my opening comment to you all. So kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really helpful. I think it's a good reminder, isn't it? And I think we are adjusting to this new reality, but certainly it's going to change things, and it is having a deep impact. Sue has just put a little thing in the chat, which shows the helpfulness of the chat, wondering if some of the slowness may be because of the videos that are all on. So possibly that would be an option to turn off your video function. But if you're speaking, then maybe put it back on, which leads me to the next person, which is Andrew Phillips, who's the engagement manager at Charities Services. Andrew, I think people will be really interested in Charities Services perspective as you know, hearing from you. First of all, how things are going. I assume everybody's out, and then any messages that you've got. Also, what is it that you would like to hear from the sector? What would you like to hear from us? Because we see you as playing a role, you know, as liaison in to government itself. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Stephen. Tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Andrew Phillips, Manager of Engagement Business Improvement at Charities Services. I've met some of you, not all of you. So for the last month, we've been in business continuity planning mode, pretty much across the whole department. So we're obviously, on our side, we're looking at the registration and annual reporting of charities, also feeding in wider in government about what charities think to a certain extent. And the community operations side. I know there are a couple of community advisors, I think, on the call at the moment, and they're obviously in exactly the same position, thinking about ways they can best support the community through grants, COGS and lotteries funding. So the last few weeks, we've been trying to make things work and be able to work remotely, and we've been working at home since Friday. We've been ironing out those issues, but we're now all online. All our teams are active. New charities can register, and you can file annual returns if you want to. But we know that's not going to be a huge priority for a lot of groups in the next month. So we knew that the charitable sector was going to be significantly hit, and we've been fielding quite a lot of queries right from the early stages of of the pandemic declaration, especially about reporting, subsidies, and the annual meetings. So the first things we did was pause all action on compliance, ceased our automatic communications to give charities a little bit of time to breathe. So that's just to confirm we're not going to be taking any action when it comes to removing charities for failure to file or notices that are currently out and no longer active. We're ceasing all of that work. We've also been pretty clear in our communications. I mean, this to a certain extent is a legal issue that we can't do much about, but we're being absolutely clear that although charities should usually follow the rules, where annual meetings have prescriptive rules requiring dates and in-person attendance, these cannot be complied with at present, obviously. And people can't break the lockdown to have an annual meeting, even if it says so, you have to in your rules. Charities should explore alternatives, whether these are online or simply postponing the meeting. And all our advice is kind of reflexive of what a lot of the other regulators are saying. Just documenting these decisions really clearly and communicating clearly with members is the key message. But we will not be taking any action in relation to rules breaches of these kinds. We've been in contact.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just one of the comments from people is, could you slow down a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
that's fine. Thanks.
That's standard for me. So the COVID situation has not changed my speaking far too fast.
You're far too enthusiastic, sir. That's wonderful.
Yeah, sorry. So in relation to the subsidies, we've been in pretty constant communication with our colleagues. So that's Inland Revenue, MB and MSD, to determine how subsidies apply to charities. And when those answers have come, we've communicated those through our channels, which in the most recent updates that I got today was the NZBN numbers are not going to be required going forward. So that just makes it a little bit easier for groups that might not necessarily have an NZBN. All incorporated charities do have an NZBN, but they might not be aware of it because it was given to them automatically.
Andrew, just to clarify on that point, that's about the COVID, the wage subsidies, right? Because I think when you go to apply, which all charities should be looking at and they are eligible for, when they go to apply, certainly one of the requirements was that you said your NZBN number, but what you're saying is that that's not actually needed.
No, so the new scheme, so the new forms that will be coming out, I think, in the next day or so, remove that NZBN requirement. So okay. The NZBN number just isn't required anymore. So that will be, or I think it might be like a non-required field. So that's something to keep in mind and communicate with your networks. So and one other thing that we've been trying to do is keep our communications to a minimum because we're very conscious that there's an explosion of information. The COVID government site is very well maintained, and that's where the official people should be going for official information, and the specific information about subsidies, they should be going to the Work and Income website where they've got the frequently asked questions pages on that stuff. But with anything really specific and relevant to charities, we're kind of trying to push out, but slowly and softly, and not sending thousands of emails to everyone. I think everyone's had an email from absolutely everyone in the universe in the last week, and I think they're kind of getting sick of it. Today we will be releasing some just Facebook communications about giving safely and scams. Unfortunately, we are starting to see quite a few of those type arrangements. So people getting calls, emails, and social media contact to try and encourage them to either donate or other ways of getting their money out of them for a COVID-related reason. But the CERT NZ website has got a really good documented list of the current scams that are out there, and people should keep their eyes on that and be communicating with their stakeholders about it. But from my perspective, our focus in the next month especially will be in being as responsive as we can and supporting as much as we can. And we want to hear about the challenges that charities are facing, as well as the good stories about how they're responding. And that's why we've got two of my team here today, Francesca Ephraim, who many of you will probably have met, and Kate Bonneman, both who will be listening, and any way we can help, we are here to listen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So from your perspective, one of the helpful things of a call like this or gathering people together is to hear the collective voice of issues that we're seeing on the ground, to be able to communicate that to you. Great,
absolutely,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so then the final perspective before we have a bigger discussion or break into groups is if Sue's on the line. So Sue's the CEO of Philanthropy New Zealand. And I just thought it would be helpful, Sue, if you don't mind giving us, I guess, a perspective from funders' perspective and any other thoughts that you've got. Thank you.
Great. Tēnā koutou katoa. Hope everyone is doing okay in day 2 of lockdown. I'm also very interested in the collective voice. Andrew, just want to say it's been great to see the flexibility that Charities Services has shown, because we know government is quite rule-bound. So philanthropy and grant making is a very broad church, so there's no way I can speak for everybody. I thought I'd just quickly start off by talking about the financial situation that a lot of funders are in, before looking at kind of the common approach that they're taking and where they're heading with their funding. So funders, as I said, are a broad church. So some of them are experiencing, well, they're all experiencing significantly lower returns on their capital. And for some of them, that will mean that there is reduced money to give out in the next year and potentially the years after that, depending how this goes. So that's the kind of the grim news. But others are set up quite differently, or they've been putting aside reserves kind of to smooth it over for such a time. There was a lot of learnings from the global financial crisis around that. William, you might want to mute. Okay, cool. And some are actually giving more. So we're seeing some emergency response funds set up, and we've even heard that there's some individual donors who are increasing the amount that they can give. So there's some real bright spots as well. In terms of the focus of funders, obviously looking after their teams, and this has been a week of upheaval for them to try and get used to. So kind of the immediate response, there's quite a common approach, which is funders getting in touch with their grantees saying, use the funding for your highest need, not what we've contracted you to do. If you've been funded for events, you can't do the events, turn it into operational spend. A lot of funders are also getting in touch to say, we're extending your deadlines, we're reducing your reporting requirements, and they're trying to be accessible and communicate proactively. And some have got huge volumes of community groups they fund, so that is quite a challenge. Philanthropy New Zealand put out an open letter, and in it there are some principles for funders, and there's a lot of funders that are following these principles. We're also seeing a lot of funders who are getting in touch with their grantees asking about community need and how they can help, and putting more money into the charities that they've already got relationships with when they fund. There's also quite a bit of regional collaboration occurring. The Waikato was first off the block, so you can look that up, where they've identified community groups that may be seeing additional demand, and they're getting in contact with them to see how they can help. They've instituted a one door to all funders, so you have one application and you access, I don't know, there's about 7 or 8 funders in that group, and some of the funders are committing additional money to meet the increased needs. So that's just a great example, and we know that other regions are in the process of developing their model. So that's the immediate situation. Funders are also starting to look ahead, like we all are, and often have got more questions than answers, but they've started thinking, what is the community need going to be? And right through from thinking, what is the community need going to be, through to what systems do we need to change to make sure that philanthropic and grant making money can have the biggest contribution. So that's the bright spot, I guess, that some of these things will lead to a better system. There's a lot of talk within the funders about the current inequality out there, and that this crisis will increase that inequality. So a lot of thinking about who is most in need, and they often don't have the loudest voices. So I guess that's something for us all to watch, and we obviously need information through from the community to support kind of funding decisions about where is the need and where does funding get reprioritised to. So that's probably enough from me at this stage. Happy to answer questions. We're also putting out the first of what we intend to be a weekly sector update today. So people can email info@philanthropy.org.nz. I'll put that in the chat actually if you want to receive that weekly update. Thanks, Stephen.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sue. Well, I think one of the things that has become clear is that there are resources out there, and how do we make sure that we know about them? Because certainly I've been surprised at the number of links and things going around, but collating them together and making sure that we know that there is information. So one of the things, some of you have sent me links to things that you know about. So after the call, I'll make sure to compile everything and put it in an email that goes to all of you. There's about, I think there's 67 of you now that are on that email list. So that can be a way to communicate with each other going forward. So if you know of anything else that you think others would be interested in, then maybe just send me an email and I'll make sure that gets circulated.
Sarah, sorry, just a suggestion. A lot of companies are using Slack as a method of communication between one another. And I wonder, it's been used by other tech companies to emulate around different type of situation, hackathon and so forth. I'm just wondering whether there would be a appropriate channel of communication for everybody to find a place of what's going on and contribution as sort of a centralized place.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely an option. Yeah, I use Slack in my work and am on other Slack channels as well. I guess it's the appetite of the group and whether not everybody will want to or be interested. But why don't we take that discussion offline? Happy to have a chat with you and set something up for those who are interested. I'm really keen that this isn't, some of you told me before the call that you just wanted to listen. And so that's cool. But I'm also keen that, well, I know that there's a wealth of information and a lot of you will have things that you would like to say and share from your perspective. So I'm thinking that that's going to be really hard with 50 plus of us, because if we each go around, we will be here for hours and hours. But what I'd love to do is try using technology and have these things called breakout rooms, and send you to breakout rooms. So there will be about 10 of you in each of those rooms. And that way you can have some discussions among yourselves and then appoint one person maybe to report back. And I think what would be helpful is what are the top 3 things that you talked about in your group, and how can we be helping and supporting charities at this time? Not to be too prescriptive about this, but I think that might be a helpful thing to do. So unless anybody strongly objects, I'm going to try doing that and sending you to different rooms. And then I think you'll probably be okay to take your video, to allow your video to be used. I see in the chat somebody has commented that they were on one where there was 150 people and it wasn't an issue. So that way you can at least see each other in the chat. And then maybe why don't we give, say, what do people think, maybe 15 minutes to talk, and that way you'll be able to express yourself, share anything you want, and then we'll come back as a bigger group, and hopefully we can then also compile the issues and the lists and any practical ideas that came out of the smaller groups, so that we can all benefit from that. Because I'm quite keen that this isn't just that there is actual practical things that result from this call. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There's going to be 6 rooms, and it looks like there's going to be about 8 of you in each. So I'll go ahead and create those now. And we'll join back in about 15 minutes. So when you're in the room, just feel free to introduce yourselves briefly and then maybe have a discussion. All right, let's have a go. I think you have to hit join the rooms as well. On your screen somewhere, it will probably say join. And I've started the timer now. And I'm just going to pause the recording while the rooms are underway. We've had a mini room running at the main room for those people who weren't in the groups, but just so you know, we're about to get a whole bunch of people back together. One of you commented that that you needed an NZBN number to apply, but just you weren't on the call at the beginning, but that is no longer required, just so you know.
Oh, good. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So these breakout rooms should be finishing in about.
Well, it's been nice, nice meeting some of you. So Jennifer, are you Samoan?
Tuvalu.
Oh, Tuvalu. Hey. Of course, Nelson College for Girls.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're all back together now. I have to admit, I'm shocked that technology is actually working. Like,
yeah, and the good news is I use them all the time, and when we have our stuff, which usually starts at 1 in the morning till 4 in the morning, and we've got 25 nations from across the whole globe, it works. WebEx works even better. So yeah, no, you're doing really well.
It's very good. So yeah, so I hope that was helpful. The aim there was that we could each have a chance to speak in the smaller group. And now there were 6 of you, 6 groups. So I would love to hear back a representative of each of the groups to give an overview of what it is that you were talking about. And that way we can get a sense of the themes that are coming out and what it is that's impacting charities, because ultimately that's what we're here to talk about, is how we can support them better. So if the group, let's just go group number 1. What were you chatting about?
Andrew, you can summate.
Oh, sure. So we were group number 1, were we? I'm sorry, I didn't know what group number I was.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Number 1.
Okay. We quite a good talk. I mean, I think inevitably it ended up focusing largely on the wage subsidies and how those apply to charities and how they could be appropriately delivered, challenges in the application process. That was really useful for me because I'm going to try and feed some of that stuff back to the MSD people and the MB people. In particular, things like information disappearing entirely. If you don't have an MSD account, you can't then check in on your account. Some people getting paid out on that night that they applied, which is pretty amazing. I was amazed I didn't realize it was happening that quickly. Some people have been waiting for 5 days and it still hasn't come through. Then thinking about the accountability mechanisms around that wage subsidy, what government is going to require going forward, talking about the quite strict requirements which seem to be in the declaration and how those compare to when there were subsidies given out during the Christchurch earthquakes, and how there weren't many accountability mechanisms. So what does that mean in practice for people? What should they be doing? And there was just talk around making sure we could document those really properly. Ant's mentioned thank you payroll. It's got a really good explanation of how to best account for the wage subsidy when it comes in and what different options are available to you. So he said that's a good website to check out. Other than that, and there are a few like kind of broader observations, thinking about going forward strategically, what's going to happen at the end of this? How can we, utilize this to be thinking about impact and making evidence accessible, and changing the way people are doing things in a more kind of systematic way, and thinking about how we can utilize young people and how they're managing this situation, and taking the learnings from them or empowering them to be trying to lead things through this time when obviously technology is going to be a big way of doing things. And so, for example, TikTok be utilized for the public good. That's the question I've got to ask. But that's us, I think. If anyone else wants to add anything.
That's a great summary. Thank you. And feel free to drop off the call. Like I didn't have a set time that this would end. So I know some of you have other calls to go to, other things. Don't worry, just go do whatever you need to do. It's fine. But I'm seeing the chats as well. Some people are putting in their emails and different contact info. If everyone agrees, I might just share the full list of people and contact info so that we can be in touch with each other afterwards. If you don't want that, this is the easier way, right? If you don't want that to happen, then email me and I won't include you, but I'm pretty sure most of us will. So Could we move to the second group? I think, Darren, you may have been in that group.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion. We were nice mix of people from charities and people from government in there, which was really good. Some of the things that are common in terms of what people are finding challenging at the moment is that balance between the immediate problem and thinking towards what's going to happen later, the strategic issues, whether that is around, immediately needing to deal with the fact that there's 16 staff that are in isolation in countries all around the world in differing sort of states of safety, wondering about, the immediate pressure of staff health and well-being, through to then having to look at budget cuts and what that's going to mean. Is it going to mean laying off staff, or is it going to mean other cuts? And then what should they cut? And focusing on cutting the right things. Excuse me. Or, how do you keep daily operations going when they involve people getting out and about and working with people, but you've still got a vulnerable community that you're dealing with, and how do you maintain that? So there's some real, gritty operational stuff that's challenging people as well at the moment. We talked about culture being so important. If you've got a good culture in the organisation, the need for that to be maintained somehow in the online world that we're all working on now, and as leaders in organisations, that it's the leader's role to keep that stuff going and keep a team really tied into that sense of purpose that our organisations would have, and also for that to be inclusive of volunteers. A lot of volunteer programs have stopped within organisations, but they're going to be that crucial resource that help organisations pick that up and move out. In the future, you're going to rely a lot on your volunteers, and they'll be feeling a sense